Hello.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hi, Konrad.
Well, nice to meet you. I was
Yeah.
I was I was hoping that we could maybe meet in person in Krakow,
Yeah. This is
but
it. The virtual person.
yeah,
All
but
exists.
yeah, situation is special, so our meeting is also
Yeah.
not regular one.
Hmm.
Um, so I would like to ask if maybe because now you're kind of you're established artist and filmmaker and so on, but I wanted to ask you, how did it all began for you? I mean, why did you get interested in found footage, which has become kind of your trademark, that you are using found footage in your work? So I would like to know how it started, this fascination with the material that already exists.
Um, um, I started studying arts um, from my early secondary school, art school. And then I started to work as sculptor and photographer. And then there was an accident. I was banned from all, and I was member of the Béla Balázs Film Studio. That's very important. And I was also working with other avant-garde um, groups like theater or music, like contemporary music, etc. And there was a very, very inspiring Hungarian filmmaker, more than inspiring, Gábor Bódi, who made found footage films, and also he was running the experimental film section of the Béla Balázs studio. And I was also acquainted with contemporary music, with minimal music. Uh, and I was also collecting old photographs. So I was inspired by photograph collections, found footage, genius, inspirative work of Gábor Bódi. And this inspiration came from another direction that I had a part-time job from 1970 78 in the Cultural Research Institute, where I was working with cultural visual education school, and then visual anthropology and visual um, culture research. And there I had this opportunity under a very important cultural figure in the communist times, um, and he supported our work collecting home movies as archivists
Mhm.
for cultural analysis and photographs. So we built up a small film archive
Mhm.
and visual
But
culture archive based on home movies of
okay,
Hungarian people.
okay,
And
but
the
this
motivation,
sorry, but this was like a kind of this project. What was it? I mean, what was the idea of gathering? It was an art
the
project,
idea
or
was, yeah, the idea was not just photo collecting, but as the aspect of home movies
Mhm.
is not only banality, but we're focusing on old pre-war and right post-war home movies.
Mhm.
And because we had this, we, meaning I had a friend that time, András Bán, who were dealing with the photography, and I focused on the film. So for 6 years, we were collecting the home movies, as a private history of people, a private history of families, individuals, told in these visual diaries, let's call home movies, the banalities and the family rituals, etc. Now, under the communist regime, the Soviet type of communist regime, thought police, doublespeak, and manipulated history were common. So our presumption was that history, not in propaganda films, not in official documentaries, but more in the underground, the alternative filmmaking, like Poznan School, and they were wonderful Polish filmmakers who had 16mm cameras. So we thought that this is the historical doublespeak of this communist regime, that the past was manipulated. So it was not a political motivation directly, but a cultural motivation. How is the history? What interpretations are history? So finished with the propaganda, and like Kolakowski, your historian and philosopher, or Hungarian philosophers and samizdat people. So it was a kind of counterculture collection where
independent history,
different narrative than the official history. So, and that's why I started to talk about Gabor Bódi, because he, in 1978, did a wonderful film, a very inspiring half an hour film together with Péter Timár, based on the found footage and accidental avant-gardist gesture. So they collected home movies, 9.5mm, 8mm films, transferred it to 16mm film, blow up, and they made a fantastic collage film, and the title was Private History. So it was an inspiring step towards the historical narrative, the film language, and the non-nostalgic interpretation from private microhistory and visual memories of photo albums and photographs and films of the private person, because the doublespeak of the Soviet type of regimes is that at home you're free, and in officially you know how to behave. Therefore, this was the main inspiring for us to collect, and for 6 years we were collecting home movies in a very simple way, because we had very limited sources. So we transferred to SD video, so low band or high band beta SP, and gave back the films to the owners, or if they wanted, they could donate it to our little archive called Private Photo and Film Archive. And in 1987-88, I had a friend who just got a new, so we already had hundreds and hundreds of hours of films, and we started to make interviews with the filmmakers and photographers, your family stories. So we had a filmic interview. What is your filmic past? How did you film? And what is your personal story? And then the narrative. What did you film? What is on this picture? What is on this picture? Where it was? Who, what, where? So we had data. And after 6 years, I met a friend of mine who just got, in the melting Gorbachev periods, a post at the a work job at the Cultural Ministry film department, which was the film censorship office. and that was melting around, you know,
Yeah.
the Chernobyl and the late communism agonization. And exactly this time, this young a friend of mine, who was, I think he was also in his 30s, like me, said, "Why don't you make a film about this? I just got this new post." When I told him that we're collecting and we have this. And then he said, "Write me a page or 2 pages and we would give you money." And then I went back with this money to the Balázs Béla studio, and we went to the television and co-production. So the motivation was to give a voice to a different aspect through film, and it was not necessarily visual anthropology or self-representation or visual sociology or banality analysis, but it was also another history, private history. So that's the story of my series that I started to make far after Gábor Bódi committed suicide in 1985, unfortunately, and I started my films in 1988, inspired by the found footage. I didn't know at that time that this found footage and collage film had existed that way, because Gábor also gave Bódi Gábor, or Gábor Bódi, gave the theoretical, aesthetical, and historical novelty to the avant-gardist gesture. Tell me the story in a different way. And as a source material, of course, these amateur movies are not perfect, crystal clear cuts. As a 16mm black and white film, of course, it's a low resolution. You see the grains, it's scratchy, and the camera is jumping, but it tells you a different story.
Yeah, yeah, different picture, and also
a different vision of life. So yeah.
So I was also wondering, I mean, like, what is your method? I mean, how do you start working on a film? Is it like that? The first comes the idea that you have some idea, not a script, obviously, but kind of idea for a film, and then you look for the material, or is it like that
Well,
you first like
usually
browse
that's
through the
case.
material?
No, in this genre or this aspect of filmmaking, because I did other kind of things, not little number of short and one longer fiction film, but this was essentially a kind of place between filming and art. So this is a collage film. And that means that in this road, I usually chose to have a collection, one film collection, or have an idea and from different collections put together something. But the starting point was more or less, usually in this genre, let me emphasize this, was the film material and the story around it. So all the films that you will see now in my retrospective on the Krakow a platform, festivals platform now, where we're really gathered together by the selection committee, by Barbara Orlitz and the festival, only based on this. And this is the method. So have a story and let's figure out what is behind the picture. So it is also a detective story. It's not obvious what's there. And of course, if there is a family collection, home movie collection, like 6 hours or 2 hours, you don't tell everything with that, because it's not the family interpretation, which is in the private context is in old times, in the pre-digital and pre-net internet environment, where you have celluloid film, that you record it, edit it or not, and then put it to the projector and watch it together with the family or with someone you share it. So this recontextualizing is not the family nostalgia or their vision directly, but a new interpretation, like a novel is written based on letters and diaries. And then what is written there, like Søren Kierkegaard wrote under 3 different, or so the fiction and reality, documentary and docufiction are always, but you know, if you think of Flaherty, who did Nanook, 1920 something, you know, he directed it. He told Nanook, now we go out and we make the hunting. So we know that the framework of documentary is very rich, but from the first minute, it is quasi-fictionalized or interpreted by the filmmaker. And this is the case in our work. And then, because having this musical background and the Balázs Béla Studio avant-garde section, experimental film section, I start always like a patchwork to build up the story, understand what's behind the picture, because this recontextualizing is also attribution of meanings. And this is what we do. It's a Hitchcockian presentation. You see something, you know what is it, you understand the visual thing so quickly, because human perception is, and culture perception is even more quicker. You know, if you see a person on a photograph, you can, if you have an experience in it, you can immediately say the clothes, the background, the person, the haircut, the dress, the objects, the cars are framing precisely where we are, what we see right now. So you know that it is a pre-First World War or post-Second World War photo or film you are seeing. And therefore, because human perception is so quick, you don't have to describe so many things, but in a collage way, one could tell a story with different outcomes or different interpretation. Not necessarily the same what the film owner or filmmaker represents.
Sure. So
it's, briefly, it's a kind of, to me, this way is an aspect of seeing somewhere in between fine arts, film, and cultural anthropology and poetry.
Sure, of course. But so it is like that each of your films has some kind of a grain, some starting point, some photograph or some film fragment that it has started with, that's something that caught your attention, and then you started to build the film around it.
Yes, it's not necessarily just the visuals, because one has to have the story. So like Free Fall, that is in the festival now, there was the big challenge that it's a very, very happy home movie. If you don't know what is happening
context,
behind 1938. So to me, the big challenge and the problem to solve and to answer the question, how happy family films could interpret or mediate or express through composition, music, the opposite what is on the film. Because these people, these were especially Hungarian Jews,
Yes.
under anti-Semitism, and they were continued the filmmaking until they were deported or put into Jewish forced labor, and then the Soviets captured them and put them into concentration camp in Soviet Russia. So they didn't care who was Jewish forced labor.
Sure.
For the Soviets, it's indifferent. So what I'm saying, this film is one of the best examples, to answer your question, for the daily banality of life, the happiness that is always selectively and mostly on the home movies, and even today with iPhone recordings, people, persons, human beings tend to create the happy memory abilities, the happy phases of a family. Now, there is a paradox that if you look through home movies or photo albums in tons, then you see that there are a lot of marriages, but you don't see divorce.
Yeah.
There are no divorce footage. So this is the best example. Of course, there is funeral, but this means if the example is clear, if you have an anthropological collection and you invite a person from the Mars alien comes in, and if he understands, it understands the footage, then he would think that if you provide this home movie set, then it's clear that human beings never die and always laugh and always marry, and they have always little kids. So the big thematic choices, apart from artists and interesting thinking people, it's always the banality. So in Free Fall, what you see is that was the big problem and the big challenge, and it's always modeling everything else. That there is a contradiction between the inner background context and the interpretation, what you give through art. And here I have to mention one very important thing, that the music has a very, very important function in these films. I worked with several, 3 or 4 great composers, musicians, like Miss Universe had Laszlo Melish. A lot of my films have been made with together with Tibor Semző, who was several times also in Krakow Festival, because he started to make films inspired while we were working together, and he's a composer. So, and the music has not a dramatic, not a nostalgic, but also part of the interpretation.
I would also like to ask if you are coming back to your old films, and do you watch them, and do you have a feeling that you could like change anything in them?
Well, it is a big problem, and serious composers, real serious composers do that, and they redo it. But the only choice I really had to leave them as they are until I have better technique. Or when I had, in the case of Danube Exodus, I made a huge installation, film installation, like, so that's a different channel, but not to change it. The only thing I would love to change, if I would have time, and I hope I will, and because I'm just retransferring for big money my first film's original footage, which was transferred to SD, not HD, Now I will remake them in HD because I have 2K transfers, nice digital transfers. So there is a possibility to play around.
Mhm.
Is there something that is necessity? But why should I? There are new things. I mean, if it would be bad, you wouldn't see it. The
Mhm.
only thing I would change are misspellings in the captions.
Mhm.
In
Mhm.
Bartosz, there are three, and I don't see the film anymore, the Bartosz, my first, but I always see those three misprints that something is on the captions. And that is a big problem.
Okay.
but
Okay.
but not because I'm contented completely with my own work,
Mhm.
but because there is nothing,
Mhm.
nothing what I should say about that, but more extended.
Mhm.
And if extension comes, then I did this several times. So Hunky Blues was also a huge film, but I had to compress it. So it's a lot of questions, but and and if a film is not good, it doesn't call anybody, then let it die. So I'm happy that still some films are screened, or universities or museums still collect them. But the only thing I would change is the misprints.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay, and maybe one more question. If have you thought about like working with the contemporary material, like contemporary
I
footage,
do that, but
like
it's not in this
YouTube
series.
or something, like composing something
Not
of this?
YouTube, but I'm doing it.
Hmm.
I'm doing it, but it's not on this festival,
Yeah, yeah. But are you
and
working?
it's not.
Are you
I'm
working on it
working.
now?
Not right now. Not. I'm making an exhibition, but what I'm doing is usually my own footage comes to installations,
Hmm.
so not into cinema,
Hmm.
but but video installations which I really like, or small clips, but not in this genre, not
Hmm.
in this
Film.
let's say docufiction or found footage docufiction, but it has its own life. I hope, but I understand the Krakow Film Festival that they chose this section because, first of all, they saw these films. We've been in professional contact since many years with the festival, and they like this.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you very much,
thank
Peter.
you.
It was pleasure to meet you.
Dziękuję bardzo.
Dziękuję. Bye bye.